Turn around. Hands on the wall, now.
Officer, I'm a customer. Invoice 4092. I'm waiting on paid lumber.
Manager says you're trespassing. That makes this my problem.
Then check the invoice. Don't make this a mistake.
I decide what's a mistake. Give me your ID. Now.
The Build Right hardware store sat off the interstate in a sprawling suburb of Virginia about 20 miles south of Washington, D.C. It was a Tuesday morning, crisp and bright. The parking lot was filling up with pickup trucks, contractors loading drywall, and suburban dads looking for lawn fertilizer. It was the kind of place that smelled of sawdust and fertilizer, a hub of industry and home improvement. It was 10:15 a.m. The sky was a piercing blue without a cloud in sight. Marcus Thorne checked his watch. He didn't have time for this. He had a crew waiting at the site. "Look, check your system. Invoice number 4092. Name's Thorne. I'm just waiting for your yard guys to bring the pallet around." Kyle crossed his arms. "I'm not checking anything for a trespasser. You people always have a story. Last week it was gas money, today it's a phantom lumber order. You're leaving." Kyle pulled out his cell phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously calm. "Call the police if you want, but when they get here, you're going to look foolish." "We'll see who looks foolish when you're in handcuffs," Kyle sneered, dialing 911. "Yes, I'm at the Build Right on Jefferson. I have an aggressive transient here. He's refusing to leave, he's harassing customers, and he's acting threatening. Yes, a large black male. Please send an officer immediately." Marcus shook his head, leaning back against the brick wall, folding his arms. He wasn't going anywhere. He knew who he was. He just hoped the officer who responded would have more sense than the manager. Unfortunately for everyone involved, the officer closest to the scene was Derek Stanton. Marcus Thorne was 48 years old, though his posture made him look taller and broader than most men half his age. He didn't carry himself like a man who needed to beg for anything. He stood with the relaxed readiness of someone who had spent 2 decades watching horizons for threats. Marcus had retired from the United States Marine Corps 3 years ago as a master sergeant. 22 years of service. 4 tours in the sandbox. He had led platoons through Fallujah and organized logistics for battalion-sized movements in Helmand Province. He had a Bronze Star with a V device for valor tucked away in a drawer at home, not that he ever talked about it. After retiring, Marcus didn't sit on his porch. He leveraged his decades of logistics experience to start a specialized contracting firm. He was currently the primary site lead for a classified infrastructure upgrade at a nearby Department of Defense facility. The project was worth $12 million. The measurements on the cardboard were for a reinforced retaining wall that needed to be shored up before the inspectors arrived the next day. He had stopped at Build Right because his usual supplier was back-ordered on pressure-treated timber, and he needed the wood now. He was dressed for work because he did the work. He didn't wear suits to the job site. He wore Red Wing boots and heavy cotton t-shirts that could take a snag from a nail. He had money in the bank enough that he could have bought this hardware store if he really wanted the headache, but he didn't feel the need to broadcast it. He drove a 2018 Ford F-250 parked right there in the contractor loading zone, though the manager hadn't bothered to look at the truck. Marcus was a man of patience. You don't survive 20 years in the Corps without learning how to wait. He had waited in blistering heat for transport choppers that never came. He had waited in freezing rain for orders that changed 3 times. Waiting for a forklift driver to bring out a pallet of lumber was nothing. But having his integrity questioned, that was something else. It gnawed at him. He looked at the piece of cardboard in his hand. To him, it was a checklist. To the manager, it was a prop for a beggar. Marcus thought about showing the manager his receipt, which was folded in his back pocket, but a stubborn streak of pride stopped him. He had already stated his business. He had given the invoice number. He shouldn't have to produce papers just to exist in a public space. He had fought for this country. He had bled for the rights of people like Kyle to be ignorant. But that didn't mean he had to like it. He watched the traffic on Jefferson Avenue. He knew the police were coming. He wasn't afraid of the police. For most of his life, he had worked alongside them, trained with them, and respected them. He assumed a simple conversation would clear this up. "Officer, check the invoice. Ask the yard guy." Simple, logical. But Marcus had been out of the country for a long time on his last few tours. He sometimes forgot that back home things had changed. He forgot that to some people a big black man standing still was inherently dangerous. Kyle Vance was 32 years old and had been the manager of this Build Right location for 6 months. He was climbing the corporate ladder, or at least he was trying to. He had transferred from a smaller store in Ohio, bringing with him a philosophy he called total store control. He was obsessed with metrics, cleanliness, and image. He wanted his store to look like a showroom, not a lumberyard. He hated the dust. He hated the contractors who tracked in mud. And mostly, he hated anything that he felt lowered the property value of his domain. Kyle had a history, though it wasn't one that appeared on his resume. At his last store, he had called the police on a group of Hispanic day laborers who were waiting on the public sidewalk across the street, claiming they were intimidating customers. He had fired a cashier for giving an employee discount to her cousin. He was a man who felt powerful only when he was enforcing rules, even if he had to invent the rules to enforce them. When he saw Marcus Thorne standing by the exit doors, Kyle didn't see a customer. He didn't see a veteran. He saw a nuisance. He saw a man holding a piece of cardboard, the universal symbol of panhandling. Kyle's mind immediately filled in the blanks. Homeless, drug addict, probably aggressive, bad for business. He didn't bother to look at what was written on the cardboard. He didn't bother to ask his cashiers if they had just processed a large order. He didn't notice the expensive truck parked 20 feet away with the Thorne Logistics decal on the door. Kyle felt a surge of adrenaline when he made the 911 call. It was a power trip. "He's aggressive," Kyle had told the dispatcher. That was a lie. Marcus hadn't raised his voice once, but Kyle knew the buzzwords. If you say aggressive, the police come faster. If you say loitering, they might take an hour. If you say threatening, they come with sirens. Kyle wanted this man gone now. He stood by the automatic doors, arms crossed, watching Marcus with a smug expression. He wanted the other customers to see him taking charge. He wanted the suburban moms to feel safe. He felt like a protector of his little retail kingdom. He didn't realize that the man he was staring down had protected entire cities. "They're coming," Kyle called out loud enough for customers entering the store to hear. "You can still leave. Save yourself the trouble." Marcus didn't even look at him. He just kept his eyes on the horizon, the cardboard hanging loosely in his hand. This infuriated Kyle. He was used to people arguing, begging, or fleeing. He wasn't used to being ignored. The silence made him feel small, and Kyle Vance hated feeling small. Officer Derek Stanton was 29 years old and had been with the force for 4 years. He was bored. He had joined the department looking for action, imagining high-speed chases and drug busts. Instead, he spent most of his days writing traffic tickets and mediating disputes between neighbors over fence lines. Stanton was what the older guys at the precinct called a badge-heavy officer. He loved the gear. He wore the tactical vest, the extra magazines, the Oakleys, the combat boots. He treated a suburban patrol beat like it was a war zone. Stanton had a file, too. 6 complaints in 4 years, 2 for excessive force, 4 for rudeness. None of them had stuck. The department called it proactive policing. The community called it harassment. Stanton had a worldview that was simple and dangerous. There were wolves and there were sheepdogs. He was the sheepdog. Everyone else was either a sheep to be herded or a wolf to be put down. When the call came over the radio, disorderly subject at Build Right refusal to leave aggressive behavior. Stanton perked up. Finally, something real. He hit the lights and siren cutting through the mid-morning traffic. He visualized the suspect before he even arrived. Transient, drunk or high, belligerent, probably a thief. Stanton was already deciding how he would handle it. Command presence. Overwhelming force if necessary. No nonsense. He pulled his cruiser up to the curb right in front of the Contractor pickup sign blocking the lane. He saw Kyle Vance, first the manager waving frantically, pointing. Then he saw the target. A large black male, over 6 feet tall, muscular build, standing by the wall. Stanton's eyes zeroed in on the cardboard in the man's hand. Panhandler, he thought. Confirmed. Stanton stepped out of the car. He didn't adjust his hat or check the scene. He dropped his hand to his holster, not drawing, but resting it there, a signal of dominance. He walked with a swagger, chin up, eyes hidden behind his sunglasses. He didn't see a master sergeant. He didn't see a taxpayer. He saw a problem that needed to be removed. The bias was instant. Stanton saw a black man in work clothes in a predominantly white suburb accused by a white manager in a polo shirt. The narrative wrote itself in his head. He didn't need to ask questions. He needed to clear the scene. He marched toward Marcus, ignoring the customers walking by, ignoring the calm demeanor of the man he was approaching. Stanton was ready for a fight, even if nobody else was. "Turn around and put your hands on the wall," Stanton barked as he closed the distance. He was still 20 feet away. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask what was going on. He went straight to commands. Marcus turned his head slowly, looking the officer up and down. He recognized the type immediately. He had seen young Marines like this, eager, aggressive, dangerous, if not reined in. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice level, "I'm a paying customer waiting for a pickup." "I said turn around," Stanton yelled, closing the gap. He was now within arm's reach. "The manager wants you gone. That means you're trespassing, and now you're refusing a lawful order." "I'm not refusing," Marcus said, standing his ground but keeping his hands visible. "I'm explaining. The manager is mistaken. I have an invoice. I bought lumber." "I don't care about your lumber," Stanton snapped. "You're soliciting. You're harassing people with that sign." Marcus held up the cardboard. "This isn't a sign. It's measurements. Look at it." Stanton swatted the cardboard out of Marcus's hand. It fluttered to the ground, landing face up. "Littering 2. You're done. Give me your ID." Marcus took a deep breath. He knew this was going sideways fast. He shifted his weight. "My ID is in my back pocket. I'm going to reach for it slowly." "Don't you move!" Stanton screamed, stepping back and unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. "I said give me ID. I didn't say reach for a weapon." "You just asked for ID," Marcus said, his patience fraying at the edges. "It's in my wallet. I'm a federal contractor. If you let me show you my credentials, we can end this." "Federal contractor," Stanton scoffed. "Yeah, and I'm the police commissioner. You think I haven't heard every lie in the book? Turn around now, or I will make you turn around." Kyle Vance was watching from a safe distance, a smirk playing on his lips. "He's been arguing like this for 20 minutes, officer. He's dangerous," Kyle yelled, adding fuel to the fire. Stanton felt the eyes of the crowd. He felt he had to win. He couldn't let this vagrant talk back to him. He moved in, grabbing Marcus's left arm. Marcus didn't flinch. His arm was like a tree trunk. Stanton yanked, trying to spin him. Marcus didn't budge. "Sir," Marcus said, his voice hardening, "do not put your hands on me unless you are arresting me. And if you arrest me, you better have cause." "Resisting officer, you're under arrest," Stanton shouted. He wasn't arresting him for the trespassing anymore. He was arresting him for contempt of cop. He pulled his taser from his belt. "Get on the ground now." The scene had attracted a crowd. Contractors in the parking lot had stopped loading their trucks. A few people had their phones out. They saw a police officer pointing a taser at a middle-aged man who was standing perfectly still. Marcus looked at the taser. He calculated the odds. He could disarm this boy in 2 seconds. He knew 3 ways to break the officer's wrist before the trigger was pulled. But Marcus was a disciplined man. He knew that fighting back physically, even in self-defense, would end with him dead or in prison. The system didn't favor black men who fought cops, even when the cops were wrong. "I am complying," Marcus announced loudly for the cameras. "I am getting on my knees. I am not resisting." Slowly, with agonizing dignity, Marcus lowered himself to the concrete. The gravel dug into his knees. He put his hands behind his head. Stanton holstered the taser and rushed in, jamming his knee into Marcus's back. He grabbed Marcus's wrists and wrenched them together, snapping the handcuffs on tight. Too tight. "You want to play tough, guy? We'll see how tough you are in the cell." "You are arresting a Department of Defense contractor on false charges," Marcus said, his face pressed against the sidewalk. "Check my back pocket. My wallet is there." "Shut up," Stanton grunted, hauling Marcus to his feet. He shoved him toward the patrol car. Kyle Vance was clapping slowly. "Thank you, officer. Great job keeping the community safe." Stanton felt a surge of pride. He had taken down the threat. He opened the back door of the cruiser and pushed Marcus inside. Marcus had to bend his large frame to fit. As the door slammed shut, Marcus locked eyes with Stanton through the window. It wasn't a look of fear. It was a look of pity. Stanton got in the front seat, adrenaline still pumping. He didn't bother to pick up the cardboard from the ground. He didn't bother to talk to the witnesses who were murmuring that the guy was just waiting for wood. He started the car and peeled out of the lot, leaving Marcus's Ford F-250 behind. Back at the store, the yard foreman walked out with a forklift carrying a massive pallet of pressure-treated lumber. He looked around. "Where's the guy invoice 4092, Mr. Thorne?" Kyle Vance walked over. "I had him arrested. Panhandler." The foreman looked at Kyle like he was insane. "Panhandler. That order is worth $4,000. It's paid for. He's the lead contractor for the base project. What did you do?" Kyle's face went pale, but it was too late. The cruiser was already gone. The ride to the precinct was short. Stanton didn't speak. He was typing on his dash computer, logging the arrest, trespassing, resisting arrest, disorderly conduct. He felt good. He felt righteous. They arrived at the station. Stanton pulled Marcus out of the car and marched him into the booking area. The station was busy. Officers were drinking coffee, typing reports. The watch commander on duty was Lieutenant Frank Miller. Miller was 58 years old, a Vietnam veteran who had stayed in the reserves and served in the Gulf. He was a cop from the old school firm, but fair. He knew everyone in town. He looked up as Stanton paraded his prisoner in. "What you got, Stanton?" Miller asked, sipping from a styrofoam cup. "Vagrant from the hardware store. Refused to leave. Resisted arrest. Got aggressive with the manager and me," Stanton said, puffing out his chest. Miller looked at Marcus. He saw the expensive boots. He saw the way Marcus held himself chin-up, eyes forward, silent. He didn't look like a vagrant. "Uncuff him for processing," Miller said. Stanton unlocked the cuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists. There were deep red grooves where the metal had bit into his skin. "Name?" Miller asked. "Thorne, Marcus, Master Sergeant USMC, retired," Marcus said clearly. The room went quiet. Miller put down his cup. "Semper Fi, Top," Miller said automatically. "Semper Fi, Lieutenant," Marcus replied. Stanton rolled his eyes. "He's full of it, Lou. Claimed he was a federal contractor, too." "Empty your pockets," Miller said, his voice tightening. Marcus reached into his back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. He placed it on the counter. Then he reached into his front pocket and pulled out a set of keys with a heavy brass fob. Miller opened the wallet. The first thing he saw was the driver's license, then the retired military ID, and behind that, a white card with a microchip and a gold stripe. A Department of Defense Common Access card, CAC. Miller looked at the coding on the card. He knew what those codes meant. Green stripe, level 5 clearance. This man had access to things Miller couldn't even Google. Miller looked up, his face draining of color. He looked at Stanton. "You arrested a master sergeant with top-secret clearance for..." "What?" "Standing at a hardware store." "He was panhandling. He had a sign..." Stanton stammered, sensing the shift in the room. Miller pulled a folded piece of paper from the wallet. It was a receipt from Build Right Hardware. Time stamped 10:05 a.m. Total $4,152.68. "He bought $4,000 worth of lumber, Stanton." Miller whispered, the sound more terrifying than a shout. "He wasn't panhandling. He was shopping." Stanton looked at the receipt. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I tried to tell him," Marcus said calmly. "I tried to show him this card. He told me if I moved, he'd drop me." Miller walked around the desk. He stood nose to nose with Officer Stanton. "You didn't verify, you didn't ask. You just saw a black man and assumed," the manager said. "I don't give a damn what the manager said. You are the police, you investigate." Miller turned to Marcus. "Master Sergeant, I don't have words. I am removing these charges immediately. You are free to go." "I'm not going anywhere just yet," Marcus said. "I need the number for the JAG office at the base, and I need to call my lawyer, because my civil rights were just violated in front of 50 people. Miller closed his eyes. He knew exactly what was coming. "Stanton," Miller said softly. "Gun and badge. On the desk. Now." The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. The video taken by a contractor in the parking lot hit the internet that evening. It showed everything: the calm veteran, the screaming officer, the measurements, explanation, the arrest. The title of the video was simply, "Hero Arrested for Buying Wood." It had 2 million views by midnight. The narrative that Officer Stanton and manager Kyle Vance had constructed collapsed under the weight of the truth. This wasn't a vagrant. This was a man who had dedicated his life to serving his country, a man who was currently building infrastructure to keep that country safe, treated like a criminal because of his skin color and a pair of work boots. Kyle Vance didn't last the week. Build Right's corporate headquarters was flooded with calls. Contractors threatened to boycott the chain nationwide. Kyle was fired for gross misconduct and violation of customer discrimination policies. He was escorted out of the store much like he had tried to escort Marcus, shamed and jobless. Officer Derek Stanton fared no better. The internal investigation was short. The Bodycam footage confirmed he had escalated the situation within seconds, refused to look at exculpatory evidence, the receipt, and used excessive force on a compliant subject. He was fired. But it didn't stop there. Because of the clear bias and the violation of federal civil rights, Stanton was decertified. He would never carry a badge again. Marcus Thorne filed a lawsuit against the city and the police department. He didn't do it for the money. He did it to send a message. The city settled for $4.5 million to avoid a trial that would have humiliated them further. Marcus donated half of the settlement to a legal defense fund for veterans who had been wrongfully detained. 6 months later, Marcus walked back into Build Right. The new manager, a woman named Sarah, rushed over to greet him. "Mr. Thorne, good to see you." "Just need some drywall today, Sarah," Marcus said, smiling. He walked through the aisles, the same boots, the same t-shirt. He wasn't bitter. He was too old and too wise for bitterness. Bitterness is a poison you drink expecting the other person to die. Marcus chose justice instead. As he walked out to his truck, the sun was shining just as bright as it had on that Tuesday. He looked at the spot where he had been handcuffed. It was just concrete. The stain of the event had washed away with the rain. But the lesson remained. It's a lesson that cost a city millions and 2 men their careers. It's a simple one, really. Respect is not something you check for after you look at a bank account or a skin color. It is the default setting for a civilized society. When we let bias wear a badge or a manager's polo shirt, we don't just hurt the victim. We tear at the fabric of the very community we claim to protect. What do you think? Should police officers be required to carry personal liability insurance for cases like this? Or should the penalty for false 911 calls by managers be stricter? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. We'll keep bringing you the stories that matter. Until next time, take care of each other. The end.